In today's video, we'll explore a tragic mountaineering incident that ended in a disaster. The story follows two climbers tackling a seemingly manageable climb, only for fate to step in and change everything. A minor shift, a fraction of an inch, and the difference between life and death became heartbreakingly clear. It was August 5th, a warm summer morning. The air was still, the sky stretched endlessly above, and the valley below lay quiet, unaware of the tragedy about to unfold. Danny Gerhart, 24, and his climbing partner prepared for their ascent up Simple J Malarkey, a moderate 3-pitch 5.7 climb. The route was familiar to many climbers, considered safe but with a few tricky sections that required good judgment. Danny was confident. He had trained for this. As they moved through the second pitch, Danny reached a small alcove at the belay station. Above him, an overhanging rock formation cast deep shadows. This was where the crux began. He took a deep breath and placed his first piece of protection, a 0.75 camelot, just above the belay. But then, he saw it. A wasp's nest. The dull buzz turned into a chaotic swarm in his ears. His heartbeat spiked, and instinctively, he backed down to reassess. His hands were clammy, his breathing uneven. After a brief discussion with his partner, he decided to take an alternate approach. A common adjustment for climbers in unexpected conditions. Stepping right instead of left, he placed another 0.75 camelot in a shallow crack before moving to a new stance 8 feet above. He secured one more piece, a number 3 camelot, attaching it with an extended alpine draw to reduce rope drag. To further manage his line, he removed the second camelot. Now, only one piece protected him. Danny prepared for the crux move, a tricky committing maneuver over a small roof. The holds were polished, slick from water runoff. He moved up and right, feeling for better grips. His breathing grew heavier, uneven, the rising sun making it impossible to see his protection clearly. His fingers trembled slightly. He hesitated. He called down to his partner, voice tight with controlled nerves. "I'm gonna take a fall. It's gonna be a big one." Then he let go. For a split second, everything was fine. The rope caught his weight, stretching under the sudden force. Relief surged through him, but then, a deafening gunshot ripped through the valley. The sound was unnatural, violent. Birds scattered. Danny's partner's breath caught in his throat as he watched. The rope had snapped. Danny never loaded the belay. His partner never felt the force of his fall. He plummeted 130 feet. A scream, half a cry, half an exhale, was lost to the wind as his body twisted through the air, limbs flailing in futile desperation. Time stretched thin, agonizingly slow, then the sickening sound of impact. Nearby climbers scrambled down, voices frantic. Hands shook as they fumbled with radios, shouting for help. Someone was already pressing on Danny's chest, but there was no response. Nothing. His body lay crumpled at the base, motionless. Danny Gerhart was gone. How could this happen? The rope hadn't run over a sharp rock edge. There were no obvious cuts on the rock face. And yet, the rope had severed instantly. Investigators found the answer in a horrifying mechanical accident, one that almost no climber could have predicted. Photos from the scene showed 7 feet of rope still attached to Danny's harness. 3 to 4 feet of exposed core dangled from the breakpoint. The strands were evenly severed, an undeniable clean cut, not gradual shredding. The culprit, a single carabiner. The rope-end carabiner, a Petzl spirit, on the extended alpine draws had, through a bizarre combination of forces, acted like a belay device in guide mode. Here's how. As Danny plummeted, the rope followed his trajectory, wrapping tightly around the carabiner attached to the number 3 camelot. In normal circumstances, a carabiner is designed to guide the rope safely, allowing movement while distributing force efficiently. However, in this rare and catastrophic instance, the positioning of the carabiner in relation to the rock face created an entirely different and deadly effect. The cam was situated above a slabby rock face, an innocuous detail that would ultimately seal Danny's fate. Instead of allowing the rope to shift freely as it absorbed the fall, the rock underneath it acted as an anchor point, holding the rope in place and limiting its ability to slide. The natural movement expected in a fall was restricted, which significantly increased the force exerted on the rope at a single concentrated point. As gravity pulled Danny downward, the increasing tension forced the rope into an incredibly tight angle where it met the carabiner. This sharp bend, combined with the immense pressure of the fall, created a situation eerily similar to how a belay device functions in guide mode. The belay strand, trapped between the carabiner and the rock, experienced a crushing force that it was never designed to endure. Within milliseconds, the pressure reached a breaking point. The fibers of the rope, unable to withstand the immense force, gave way in a sudden, violent snap. The cut was clean, not frayed, indicative of a rapid and extreme load failure rather than gradual wear. Danny's lifeline, the very thing meant to protect him, had been severed in an instant, leaving him in free fall with nothing to break his descent. Danny had essentially taken a Factor 2 fall directly onto the carabiner, something nearly unheard of. And the most heartbreaking fact, had the carabiner shifted just 2 inches to the left or right, it would have been hanging in free space instead of lying against the rock. The rope wouldn't have severed. He would have walked away with nothing more than a bruised ego. But fate decided otherwise. Was this avoidable? Or was it truly a freak occurrence? Some climbers argued that extending the first Camelot might have prevented the accident by shifting the rope path. Others believed a different quick draw length could have changed the carabiner's positioning. But the truth is, no one knows for sure. The day after the accident, Kearns, an experienced local guide, climbed Simple J Malarkey with another guide to closely examine what could have caused the rope failure. Drawing from their extensive knowledge of the route, they carefully retraced Danny's steps, inspecting the rock formations, gear placements, and potential contact points that could have influenced the outcome. After discussions with the belayer and first-hand observations, Kearns reached the same unsettling conclusion. The rope had likely been cut in a freak and nearly unexplainable manner rather than simply breaking under force. Meanwhile, the belayer, still processing the horrific event, took extra steps to ensure there had been no pre-existing flaws in the rope. They confirmed that the rope was in good condition before the climb, free from exposure to any chemicals or unseen weaknesses. To further investigate, the remaining intact section was sent to Ryan Jenks of How Not To for controlled brake testing. Jenks later posted his findings on Instagram, admitting that the exact cause of the failure remained unclear. He stressed that while climbing always involves inherent risks, this incident was particularly disturbing in its unpredictability. Further analysis raised even more questions. In previous tests, similar ropes had broken under extreme force between 10.86 and 11.33 kN. Yet Danny's number 3 Camelot, which should have absorbed a significant amount of energy, showed no deformation at all, a detail that defied expectations. If the rope had snapped purely due to force, the cam should have shown signs of stress, yet it appeared undamaged. The belayer also noted an inconsistency between the accident scene and previous rope break tests. In controlled experiments, when ropes failed, their cores weren't visibly protruding from the sheath, but in this case, Danny's rope had several inches of empty sheath extending beyond the core. These conflicting details deepened the mystery, suggesting that rather than a traditional rope failure, the rope had been severed in a highly specific way, most likely by direct contact with the carabiner. Despite exhaustive analysis, no definitive answer could be reached.